Heart disease is the leading cause of death in the USA, even surpassing cancer in recent years. And tonight, cardiologist Dr. Jack Wolfson is going to share natural ways to improve cardiovascular function, including the positive impact that an animal-based diet, including organ meat, can make on heart health, how the gut microbiome directly impacts cardiovascular function, and how the lifestyle that surrounds homesteading itself serves to detox the body and further strengthen cardio function. Specific topics are time-stamped below, and for a printable cheat sheet featuring the top 5 takeaways from today's conversation on improving heart health naturally, click on the first link in the description of this video. So with heart disease being the leading cause of death in the USA, surpassing even cancer, tonight we are unpacking how things like raw dairy, pasture-raised meats, and really even the lifestyle that accompanies homesteading can positively impact cardio health. So without further ado, I will introduce the co-host of the night, cardiologist Jack Wolfson of Natural Heart Doctor. Thank you, Dr. Wolfson, for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be on, and love the sheep video, and your book is absolutely beautiful. I love like-minded people, and I know I'm in my tribe when I'm speaking with yours. I'm really excited to share.
Well, I'm so excited to have you tonight. So let's go ahead and just warm it up here. Go ahead and introduce yourself, your practice, your premise, and just where you're at regionally as well.
I like to say that I was born into the medical matrix. My father was a cardiologist. When I was in utero, I'm listening to conversations that my father is having with my mom and with his friends, all about cardiology. So my entire life after I was born, I wanted to become a cardiologist, and I would do that. Finished up all my training in Chicago, and then I left Chicago to move out to Arizona for the weather. And I joined the biggest group in the state of Arizona, and very successful as a cardiologist. So my career was taking off, and unfortunately for my father, he was sick and he was dying of a Parkinson's-like illness in his late 50s. And then we take him to the Mayo Clinic, and the Mayo Clinic says, we have no idea why your father is sick and dying from this disease called progressive supranuclear palsy. And we've got no treatment for him, and he'll be dead within a few years. And simultaneously, and certainly I believe, ordained by God, to put me together with this young woman. And she's a 29-year-old chiropractor at the time. And she tells me all the reasons why my father is sick and dying. So Mayo Clinic has no reasons. The 29-year-old chiropractor, she's got all the reasons. And then she says, if you really want to help people, you have to become a DC. And I said, what? I just finished up 10 years of medical training, and you want me to become a DC? You want me to become a chiropractor? And she said, no, not DC doctor of chiropractic, DC doctor of cause. You need to become a doctor of cause. And that's exactly what I did.
So you spent a good deal of time in the conventional cardiology circle, and then you transitioned into a more natural approach.
So what happened is that I was working in this big group, and I'm walking around the hospitals, and I'm talking about nutrition. I'm talking about lifestyle. I'm talking anti-pharmaceutical. I'm talking anti-vaccine. I'm talking all these things that eventually get me into trouble with a lot of different people for all the reasons why you can imagine. So the writing was on the wall for me. And it's interesting because the head of the practice, he sat me down. And I don't want to say he was like a father figure to me, but he was a mentor. He was 20 years older than me, the head of the practice. And he said, listen, Jack, I totally believe in everything that you're doing, everything that you're saying, but it's bad for business. You need to stand down. And I said, I quit. And that's when I started my own company. And that was back in 2012. So I'm still a board certified cardiologist specializing in heart disease. And I've got another cardiologist with me now. I've got 2 naturopathic doctors, a chiropractor, a nurse practitioner, and a team of health coaches around the country. It's been fantastic.
Wow. All right. Great preface there. We're talking about Natural Heart Doctor with Jack Wolfson. Guys, go ahead and warm up the comment section by letting us know where you are coming from tonight. And I am here in Upper East Texas raising sheep. We have beef cattle as well in small measure, and chickens. Dr. Wolfson, do you have any homesteading ventures going on right now?
Yes. So my wife and I and our 4 children, we live in the mountains of Colorado, about 30 minutes outside of Aspen and 3 hours west of Denver. And we've got 6 goats. We've got 30 chicken, dog. I love it. Again, like I didn't grow up like this. Again, my father was a cardiologist. I grew up in the north suburbs of Chicago. And I thank God every day for my wife and what she's taught me. And she wants to just keep acquiring more and more animals. And, Grayson, I see what you're doing. And it's so spectacular. And to raise children with that, all of our kids are homeschooled, unschooled, and we're active outdoors and active with the animals and getting ready to plant our garden. They're active in the local, youth group at the church. It's a real blessing.
Mm-hmm. All right. With that, we will segue into the first question, which is heart disease is the #1 killer in the world, surpassing even cancer, as we just mentioned. Billions of dollars are being spent to cure the disease, and we do have increased and widespread access to pharmaceuticals. But why are we still losing the battle here? What's the issue at hand?
Well, with all due respect, I will correct you. Hundreds of billions are being spent, but it's not curing any disease, of course. It's all a Band-Aid approach, right? So, statins don't cure cardiovascular disease, coronary artery disease, blood pressure drugs don't cure anything. None of it is about cure. I like to think everything that we do at Natural Heart Doctor through this lens of eat well, live well, think well, test, don't guess, evidence-based supplements, biohacking strategies. That's where we really get into the curative phase, because in order to cure, you have to remove the cause. I know that you would agree, obviously. And the pharmaceuticals are not the answer. We're spending, again, hundreds of billions of dollars on cardiovascular disease, and it's still the #1 killer worldwide. Clearly, there's a problem.
So what at your practice, if it's not the pharmaceuticals that help or cure, what are the core things that you guys teach your patients or instruct your patients in to put them on that pathway to cure?
So as far as the eat well is concerned, it's an area that people love to debate. But the most important thing I tell people is eat organic food. Get the chemicals and the poison out of your food. Let's just agree with that. If you're vegan, vegetarian, paleo, keto, carnivore, whatever your dietary label is, just get the poison out. Let's start with that. Number 2, I think seafood is the healthiest and most important food on the planet. So eat plenty of wild seafood. Number 3, free-range grass-fed meats, including the organs, right? Liver, heart, kidney, pancreas, spleen. I mean, all the organs are the most nutrient-dense things in the world. And I think those are kind of my big 3 that I follow. Oftentimes I tell people to avoid gluten. In my book, I talk about gluten a lot. I'm not quite as anti-gluten as I was. I think there's other factors that we can focus on. Gluten, of course, being a protein found in wheat, barley, and rye. And I just don't think there's really much need to eat gluten-containing items. Obviously, it is biblical. It is mentioned hundreds of times in the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament, so on and so forth. But I do find a lot of people react to it, organic or not. So it's probably something, again, we don't really need too much.
I have 7 more questions surrounding food, but really quickly up front, what are the other factors that you tell people to hone in on?
So we all debate the food story. What about the sunshine part of the story? What about the sleep part of the story? So let's talk about sleep real quick. Okay, so we wake up before the sunrise, we watch the sunrise, and then we spend the day in and out of the sun, like all plants, all animals do. What is the purpose of our skin? It's a solar panel built to collect light. Our eyeballs are solar panels built to collect light. Anyone who tells you that the sun is the cause of cancer, you need to run away from those people, because they have no clue. Those are the people that are anti-raw dairy. They also think the sun causes cancer. And so we talked about sleep. We talked about sunshine, physical activity, movement, being active, of course, on the ranch and the garden with your animals, all that stuff. Working outside is all critical. But then we want to avoid environmental toxins and pollutants too. Mold and mold mycotoxins are not good. And I write a lot about this. I talk a lot about this. It's in the Bible. So Moses tells us this from the book of Leviticus 3,500 years ago, that you do not want to live in a house with mold. And if you do, you better fix it, or you got to tear the house down and actually move the stones. This is chapter 14 in the book of Leviticus. You have to remove the stones to a far out location because of the mold.
All right. So we hit on sleep, sunshine, and stress in addition to some of the food stuff we're going to talk about. But it's a bigger picture with respect to just a lifestyle in general to prevent cardiovascular disease.
Yeah, and that final component, that think well component, how do we think? Are we happy? Do we have our community? Do we have our spirituality? Do we have our gratitude and purpose? Childhood trauma is a major factor linked to adult onset cardiovascular disease. So it's a real big picture.
All right, so chiropractic care, I just think of going to a room and having somebody pop all your knuckles and all your joints. Is that a narrow-minded picture of chiropractic care or not?
Yeah, it's pretty narrow-minded, Grace, I got to tell you. So yes, they are good at popping knuckles and joints and stuff like that. But the way that it turns out is that the chiropractic adjustments, say of the cervical spine, thoracic spine, in the back, that the neurologic changes that happen with the chiropractic adjustments, because all those joints are innervated. So by influencing a change in the joint, and now you actually fire signals back in the afferent nerves up into the brain, and then efferent nerves back down into the body. So chiropractic is proven to lower blood pressure by 17/10. Somebody had a blood pressure, they're on blood pressure drugs. Chiropractic is proven in the literature, 17/10, improve heart rate variability, improve immune function, decrease allergies and atopic diseases. So definitely chiropractic is fantastic. And ultimately, we can all try and get studies and stuff like that. But the way that I would look at it, Grace, is, I just feel better when I go to the chiropractor. And I think most people who experience that feel the same.
All right, so we're going to home in on the food portion of heart disease and prevention. You touched on it a little bit with the seafood, et cetera. But really, what is the best diet to fight heart disease?
I think it's really just that ancestral diet, and then I'll throw in the raw dairy on top of it. So if we kind of have this pyramid, the foundation of my pyramid is going to be free-range grass-fed meats, including the organs, and then wild seafood. And the next layer would be raw dairy, eggs, avocados, and coconuts, and olives. Next layer on top of that, things like nuts and seeds. And then after that, green leafy vegetables, seasonal fruit, raw honey. Again, I'm not a big grain guy. Pretty much I'm 100% gluten-free. And then we don't do much pasteurized dairy, that's for sure. If we do dairy, it's raw and we get it from a local farmer. And that's a great cause to really take up and to, speak to your local political representatives about how you can get raw dairy. Again, it's like we're not forcing anybody to drink it. If you want to drink the poison milk that's pasteurized and homogenized from conventional cows, that's up to you. But if you want to drink living milk, I don't know, I know you understand this, but when I first met my wife and she said to me, she's like, it's all about the gut, all about the gut, all about the gut. When you have a healthy gut, you have a healthy body. Unhealthy gut, you're in trouble. And that's so true. So a lot of the way is actually that disease happens to people is that we take in all these toxins, mold mycotoxins, environmental toxins, plastics, phthalates, antibiotics, pharmaceuticals, fluoride in the water. It destroys the gut microbiome. And then when you destroy the gut microbiome, now you have things like leaky gut, intestinal hyperpermeability, things get into the body that don't belong, inflammation, oxidative stress, so on and so forth. So one of the key strategies really, whether it's raw dairy products, fermented raw dairy products, how they nourish the gut microbiome is absolutely essential, and why it is so heart healthy. Another great reason to have your kids out, on the ranch, in the soil, in the garden, just outside interacting with nature, because that's how you build that healthy gut microbiome. And it's absolutely critical.
So you mentioned, and I really followed you on the meat as a baseline, dairy, eggs, avocado. So just from like a personal perspective, if somebody's noticing low energy with a total absence of gluten and they wanted to go gluten-free, what kind of energy source would you substitute for that, that lack of energy? Or would you diagnose it as something different?
So if someone says, okay, I've got lack of energy, I've got fatigue, I just don't have like the get up and go. There's multiple different factors to it. But ultimately, and real quick, as far as energy, there's nothing that's going to provide more energy than liver, than grass-fed liver. It's got every vitamin, mineral, protein, fat. You're not going to get that from any plant-based source.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I'm going to get to some of the comments I've got over here on the organ meat. And I know this is a pretty broad spectrum opinion, but they say they don't want to eat filters. They don't want to eat filters. How would you respond to somebody considering the organs a filter?
Okay. The filter is not the problem because the filter doesn't store toxins. The toxins are typically either excreted in the urine or in the stool, or it is stored in fat. Kidney's a filter, liver is a filter, the heart is certainly not a filter, the heart's a muscle. But that being said, again, it has got all those vitamins. You're not going to find them in the other organs, so nothing is better than the liver. And I'll say one more thing too, is that we have a bison liver product, and we tested it for toxins from free-range grass-fed, unvaccinated, field harvested bison out of South Dakota. Nothing. Contain nothing in there. No significant toxins regarding that as a filter. So I'll leave it at that.
That's interesting. And so your opinion might be, if somebody considered a liver harmful, it might be just as harmful to eat a piece of fat off of the meat itself. Would that be accurate?
Yes, although I love eating fat from a grass-fed animal, but if you talk about a Nebraska corn-fed, soy-fed, wheat-fed fat animal, yeah, that's different. But from a free-range, pasture-raised, regenerative animal, I mean, listen, from a fatalistic standpoint, the whole planet's destroyed. Like polar bears have 200 chemicals, in their body. But we're talking about giving ourselves the best chance. And the beauty of these organs, too, is that they give you all of the nutrients needed to detoxify. So, for example, glutathione is a major detoxifier. You get that in very high amounts when you eat liver, and the ability to make glutathione from that. Trace minerals, copper, for example, that is found inside of the organs. Copper is very important as far as mitochondrial energy, electron transport chain, cytochrome C oxidase, superoxide dismutase, the body's main antioxidant. So it's really spectacular. And it's sad that a lot of people don't eat that. The American palate doesn't include that. And I think it's one major reason why people are so sick.
All right, guys, we are here tonight with Dr. Jack Wolfson of naturalheartdoctor.com. Am I right about that URL?
Yes.
Do you have a book out yet?
Yeah, so my book is actually available for free. All you do is pay shipping. The URL is freeheartbook.com. It is called The Paleocardiologist. It is available on Amazon if you want to give Amazon more money. Free Heart Book is the website. The only thing that's different in opinion-wise, two things that I'll mention from the book to where I'm at now. My understanding of mold mycotoxins from a water-damaged structure is much greater now than it was then. So I do not give enough emphasis, certainly, about that. And I think that mold from water damage and living in a water-damaged home, I think is just a 21st century crisis and maybe the biggest killer of all. It really is. Because mold is a living and breathing organism, Asbestos, mercury, lead, all these things, they're not healthy for us, but they also don't have a consciousness that says, I want to injure. The other thing, I was kind of anti-coffee in my book. I said, if you drink coffee, make sure it's organic. And I'm much more pro-coffee now than I was then. I actually came up with a brand of coffee called Cardiology coffee, espousing all the benefits.
We got some good questions coming in here. Teresa says, can you dehydrate the organs and turn them into a powder that can be added to meals?
Yes, 100%. And that's a great way to get it into kids or people that don't like it. You can encapsulate it. So you can buy, gelatin capsules and put it in there as well. We freeze dry some of the organs. There's a really cool recipe too that I like, if I may share. So what we do is we take the freeze-dried liver powder, and I'll put that in a bowl. I'll put in some raw eggs, raw honey, maybe like a raw almond butter, raw coconut oil, coconut butter, and I mix it around. And then I put it into the freezer, and it makes like little cookies. You can put them into muffin liners. So it looks like a Reese's peanut butter cup, but it is nothing close to a Reese's peanut butter cup. And it's delicious. I throw in like raw cacao nibs, sometimes some bee pollen we throw in there for a little bit of variety, but it's awesome. Yeah, liver powder is great.
Good stuff there. All right. Anthony says, what part does exercise play in your heart health program, and how much do you exercise every day?
Hey, before I answer that, let me one more food item too. Okay, so take the raw milk and the raw milk, the raw honey, the raw cacao, and mix in some of the liver powder to hide that as well. That's magical.
Mm-hmm.
So me personally, as far as exercise, again, like it's very important to be active. Be active on your job, be active on your ranch or whatever you're doing, active with your children, go for a walk in the morning, noontime, afternoon. And then all these different activities are great. I do muscle building activities, push-ups, pull-ups, squats, lunges, stand-up paddleboarding, skiing in the wintertime, and I'm a huge mountain biker.
Somebody else has a question here. Are you affiliated with the Western A. Price Foundation at all?
I'm connected to Weston A. Price. I know a lot of the people, and that really is an amazing book as far as ancestral living and eating. So Weston A. Price, it's one of the first books I read. It was called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. And it's an amazing book. Weston A. Price and his wife in the 1930s, they travel around the world by boat, and they go to visit all these native communities where people are paleo peoples. And that's all described, and talks about all the health benefits of eating that way, and then contrasting that with the people who don't eat that way, although they've got the same genetics. Which gets me to another point, Grace. I want everyone to know that their genetics are perfect. Everybody who's on this call, say it right now to yourself. Close your eyes. My genetics are perfect. I'm built in the image of God, and I'm built perfectly. Unfortunately, man-made unhealthy lifestyle, and I'm blaming the men here, that's what leads to disease. That's what leads to family history. So family history means you eat and you live like your family members that suffered from the same sickness.
That's an interesting point. All right, so you touched on this a little bit, but I'm just going to ask the question again so you can give a full expository if you want. Is raw dairy over pasteurized, homogenized dairy a benefit to heart health?
Yeah, big time. The good bacteria, the enzymes, the living proteins, unadulterated fats, for all those reasons.
All right, somebody here asks, if something tastes really bad, is my body or I guess maybe in reference to the genetic ancestry trying to tell me something?
Well, what tastes bad? We have senses to tell us if something is spoiled, if something's rotten.
Right.
But we have senses that, our sense of taste that tells us that we've had enough of a certain thing. In the plant world, we have a lot of those stopgaps. Like we eat a certain amount and then we would naturally get satiated. So as far as if something tastes bad, I could go up to any adult or child on the street who's walking out of McDonald's and say, try my liver cookie recipe that I just told you about, and they'll vomit. I mean, they will gag. They won't even be able to get it down. But again, that's a problem with society, not the recipe.
There was a good quote that I heard from someone. I was touring their sheep farm. He said, taste is a practice of wisdom. People aren't born enjoying, dark chocolate and good wine if you do drink. It's an acquired taste. And so I think that's also something with respect to the healthy foods that we eat. Would you agree on that?
I think just look at our children. When you start off the kids, the children are breastfed, and then what's a perfect first food, right? Chopped liver, chopped organs, and they love it. I mean, my 3.5-year-old daughter, she eats liver and oysters and these organs, and my 6-year-old, she's like, Dad, I'm in the mood for some liver. I mean, who says that? Who says that? We go out to a restaurant, my kids are ordering oysters, and the waiter almost falls over. They can't even understand, they've never seen it before. Yet our ancestors always ate that.
Okay, so the next question is, heartdisease.org cites that high intake of red meat increases your risk of heart disease and stroke by 16%. Therefore, the Heart Foundation suggests you aim for 12 ounces or less of red meat per week. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, all those studies are all lies. They're all sponsored companies. All of these governing bodies are all owned by corporations. Kellogg's, Nabisco, Quaker Oats. So it's quite simply, you create studies. And again, a lot of those studies, if they're done on factory farmed meats, unhealthy dairy sources, that could play into it as well. Dietary studies are very difficult to do because there's so many different factors, right? So someone who eats a lot of fast food meat, they may also drink too much alcohol or too much soda pop or smoke cigarettes or don't exercise. So there's so many different factors when it comes to dietary studies. And there are plenty of studies that show that free-range grass-fed meats, wild seafood. Wild seafood, again, people who eat, the literature on that is very clear. People who eat the most amount of seafood are the longest lived. So somebody mentioned before they're a pescatarian. If you don't want to eat meat, I don't think you have to, but I definitely think you have to eat fish if you're not going to eat animal products. So our ancestors came from the Middle East. They came from, what is now Israel. They came from like that area. They came from the rivers, and they ate seafood. It's just a reality.
So Allie asks, how can you actually get plastics out of your system?
That can be tough. A lot of times when it comes to a lot of these different toxins, making sure that you're moving your bowels every single day, you're urinating well, sauna and sweating, or just going out into the ranch and just, sweating and stuff like that is also very beneficial. There's good binders that can do this. So I like this. It's kind of like a Himalayan superfood. It's called Shilajit, Shilajit, and it is decomposed plant matter. It has like a tar, type of consistency to it. Fulvic acid, humic acid binds up a lot of those toxins as well. That's very good. And again, when you're eating more liver, like I mentioned before, the liver contains all those nutrients to assist in detoxification to get that plastic out of your body. Yeah, that's probably the best information I have on that.
All right. So are certain meats better or worse for heart health? You just talked a lot and very highly about seafoods, but red meat versus white meat, does that hold much weight?
No, not to me. I definitely think red meat is healthier in general than white meat. Most organic chicken is fed organic feed. So if you get a truly free-range chicken, then it may be somewhat equivalent. But I think in general, red meat is better than white meat in the vast majority of situations.
All right. So you spoke really highly about seafood itself. What is it about seafood in particular that makes it so beneficial for cardio health?
So one thing is it's loaded with omega-3 fatty acids, such as EPA and DHA. You cannot get those from the animal kingdom. The body consumes omega-3 fatty acids from, say, chia seeds or walnuts. It has to be converted over many, many, many different steps, and there's too many errors that are potential there. And vegans are notorious for having very low levels of EPA and DHA, despite the fact that they may be eating a lot of chia and flax and walnuts. So these omega-3 fatty acids, they are in all of our cell membranes. So the brains of the cell, it is actually the cell membrane. It's the fence that keeps everything inside the cell that belongs and keeps things outside of the cell that doesn't belong. So that is loaded with omega-3 fatty acids as EPA and DHA. It's also loaded with cholesterol, which is why cholesterol is so important inside of that cell membrane. Cholesterol, of course, forms vitamin D, all of our sex hormones, digestion. And another thing we love too are the fish eggs, like wild salmon roe. The roe contains all the nutrients that a salmon needs to come to life. And I love eating eggs. It's a cocoon for a baby chicken. It contains all the nutrients that a chicken needs to come to life. Try raising a chicken on oatmeal and the chicken's not going to get very far.
Right. All right. Somebody here says that they have struggled of affording seafood itself. Are there some economical seafoods they could go after?
Yeah, that's a great question. If you're paying for fresh, that's the most expensive. Frozen would be the next most expensive, and canned would be economical. You can get a can of sardines for $3, so hopefully that's affordable. I don't know how you can get any cheaper food than that. And again, that would go a long way.
All right. Grace asks, please touch on wild salmon versus farmed. Is it important to choose wisely in that?
Yeah, I would never eat farm salmon. It's just a totally different thing, really. First of all, the omega-3s are high in one and not in the other. The contaminants, the metals, the antibiotics, the feed that they give to farm raised, I wouldn't even bother. I wouldn't even bother eating seafood if it wasn't wild caught.
So Anthony says here, we've seen life expectancy go up over the last several generations. How do you explain that in light of the fact that our diets have actually gotten worse?
That's a great question. Number one, our water, our sanitation are certainly better than they were 75, 100 years ago. That is undoubtedly the biggest factor. The next thing is that modern medicine is very good in heroic medicine. So I tend to bash the medical industry a lot. But when it comes to trauma and emergencies, God bless the men and women who work in those situations. They are saving lives. But for prevention, treatment, and reversal of chronic disease, obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, coronary artery disease, we've got nothing. But Natural Heart Doctor, I call it the home of the 100-year heart. I believe we're built to live to 100 plus. Give the body what it needs, take away what it doesn't.
All right. Well, we have one more question, and it's perfect because we are 4 minutes off from the end, and I am so excited to hear. If you guys are new to the room, if you joined us last minute, we are talking with Dr. Jack Wolfson, naturalheartdoctor.com. As we close out here, I really loved your personal awakening to becoming a doctor of cause. And as we close out, could you just give a little bit of a final word to the audience on the importance of finding the cause rather than treating the symptoms?
Yeah, treating the symptoms is not going to work. Whatever your issue is, view it through the eat well, live well, think well, get outside more often, eat the free-range grass-fed meats, the wild seafood. Please pay attention to your sleep. I will be going to bed by 10 o'clock at the latest, but never think that you can't overcome it. There's always answers to whatever you're going through.
All right. Thank you guys so much for being here tonight. And thank you, Dr. Wolfson, for a wonderful hour. You guys can find him at naturalheartdoctor.com. Is there anywhere else or any other resource that you want to plug as we close out?
Again, yeah, if people want to go, get a free copy of my book, The Paleocardiologist, Natural Way to Heart Health, freeheartbook.com, they can do that.
All right. Thank you guys so much. It has been wonderful. And join me here next month, the 4th Thursday. I look forward to seeing you. Thank you so much, Dr. Wolfson.
Thank you.
If you're looking for something to watch next, tap this video, which is an interview with Congressman Thomas Massey on food laws you need to know about.